Hey there gamers, welcome back to the Board Game Co channel, and today we have a preview of Narcos. Hey there gamers, it's Professor Meg here, and welcome back to the Board Game Co channel. Today we have a preview of Narcos. Now this is a current GameFound campaign, so you can check out the link down below for everything that they have planned. This is a sponsored preview, and this is a prototype copy in front of me, so all rules, components, things like that are subject to change. And before we dive into it, if you'd like to see exactly how this game plays, there will be a gameplay on the channel as well between Alex and I, so you can check that out. Now in Narcos, this is going to be a game for 1 to 4 players, where depending on the number of players, there's going to be specific setup rules, and that's because you're playing with all very asymmetric factions, but these factions are going to be made up of drug cartels as well as police. So depending on what you are playing as, you're going to set up your different player area with your cards that you have available to you as well as your starting resources. But over the course of the game, players are either going to be trying to smuggle drugs and then ultimately sell them for millions of dollars, or play as the police trying to bust these different drug runs and trying to stop them. So with that, let's dive into Narcos. Now, currently in front of you, the game is set up for 2 players. So we do have a cartel faction as well as a police faction, and this is a specific board for 2 players. So just know that a lot of the setup is going to depend not only on the number of players, but the specific thing that you're playing with as well. So for example, this is the DEA over here, and the DEA is going to have certain things that they're going to apply to their setup, such as their starting chips, as well as where they start on the manhunt board up there. Now for the Medellin cartel, they're also going to start off with some specific chips as well as $20 million because they are a cartel, and certain units that they're going to be able to use. Now the cartels also start off on the political track here because they're trying to gain political influence, and they also have a specific spot that they're going to start off on this track here as well, representing how known they are in the area and therefore how well they're able to hide or not. The other thing that cartels are going to gain is a lab for them to have, which is something that's going to change depending on the number of players, that in a higher player count you have more labs available, but players are always going to have at least a C grade lab that is producing 1 drug. So as you can see by this chart here, as you start increasing your different stats, you're able to produce either higher quality drugs or more drugs, or eventually both, but you at least have that 1-1 that you're going to start off with, and you also have a spot on the manhunt track up at the top where you're going to start off as well. Now, this is a game that is highly asymmetric, so depending on the cartel or the police that you're playing as, the game is going to change with which different benefits you have, as well as your starting setup, as well as your deck that you have available to you, which is going to determine all of your actions. So you're going to have that when you start off, that we currently have in front of us the Medellin cartel as well as the DEA, but just know that there is other cartels as well as police that you're able to play as well, and this is an example of those specific asymmetric factions. Now down here we also have the round tracker, so the game is going to consist over the course of 5 rounds, and as this game is highly asymmetric, players are going to be gaining points, which are going to be these bullet coins here, but you're going to be gaining those points, and whoever has the most at the end of the game after the 5 rounds will win the game. Now even if you are playing as 2 cartels or 2 police in a 4-player game, you are not necessarily working together, where you might do certain things that will stop the cartels if you were both playing as the police, but overall you're trying to work toward those victory points for yourself individually to be able to win at the end of the game. Now, the cartels do start off with $20 million, and they also gain money throughout the game. So you're going to gain money at the beginning of each of the following rounds, and that's going to represent players being able to pay for certain cards in their hand. So you're going to have a hand of 7 cards at the beginning of each round, and when you start off, you're going to play 2 cards for their chip ability. Now, these chips we are going to be placing in a future phase, which I'll show you exactly what that looks like, but these chips are how we are going to be placing orders for what is going to happen out here on the board. So in order to perhaps gain more chips or augment other things that are going to help us as the cartel, for anything on this side here with the yellow boxes, you're going to play 2 of these cards now during this phase. So when you're doing this, it's pretty normal for things to cost money. This one in the front is very expensive, where for $10 million you can buy a airplane, which I'll just grab one of these over here for us to see what that would look like when we get to that part. And for $7 million, you would be able to gain some of the dynamite. But there are other things that you would be able to gain, for example, a route chip here, which is going to be, you are starting off with these 4 chips, and this is what the route one is going to look like, but these are how you're going to be able to gain more chips as well. So another thing that you're able to do is, this is going to be a transport, which is a drug mule. You already saw us grab an airplane. We already start off with a drug mule, so I'll just show you what those look like when we get to that phase. But this is how you're going to gain more throughout the game when you need them for a certain cost, and this is how you're also going to be able to hire certain guns. So there is a $2 million cost one that would be a 2 strength. We do already have a 2 strength one here in our inventory, but having people out on the board is going to be absolutely huge, so purchasing these people is going to be very important. Now again, there are other tokens that we're going to be able to gain, such as movement, so I'll go over all of those when we're going over that phase. But another thing that you're able to do is perhaps pay $4 million to add to one of your labs. So this one in particular is going to be adding a lab, so we would be able to add a new lab in one of the areas. But there is another symbol that allows you to upgrade your lab, which means that you're going to be able to upgrade either the quality or the quantity of drugs that you are producing. And then when those labs do produce drugs, you'll look at that chart to determine exactly what it would produce each round. Now, to look at the DEA side, they are going to have similar things, where this is going to be gaining them a policeman chip, and when you have them, they are all going to inherently start off as 1. So once they are out on the board and existing, such as you see this one here that starts off in Miami, the other symbol that you have here is upgrading it, meaning that they are going to upgrade in their power. So as you can see, this dial here is 1, 2, 3, and 4, and these are magnetized, so they do stick to the chips really easily, but that is how the DEA player is going to be able to upgrade their different policemen for the abilities that they're going to be able to do, which you're going to see when we get to that phase. Another thing that they're able to do is spend these to gain a decoy chip, which is going to be these bananas. So they would be able to spend that to gain one of those to have another decoy, because when you are placing the orders out, you're going to be placing them face down, meaning that other players don't know what they are. So if it is that decoy, that could be a way for you to throw other players off. So the DEA player or the other police players are going to have similar actions on this side that they're going to be able to play for this part. Now, after players use 2 cards to acquire chips and units, you're going to then go on to the action phase. So that's when players are going to be able to play cards from their hand for actions. So as a reminder, you start off with 7 cards, and you're going to play 2 at first to gain chips for those yellow abilities, but now you're going to be able to play 3 to be able to gain the abilities on the left side of the card instead. So taking a look here for the DEA player for the cards that are on that side, there are some that are going to be these red boxes, which you will put into play to prep for the future. So for example, if a player wanted to use this one, they would put it here into play, and then they would have this ability in the future when they would want to use it. So I will leave this here so that you can see exactly what that would look like. But there's going to be other things that players are able to do as well, such as ongoing abilities. So these are going to be once per use abilities, where it looks very similar to this one, but instead of having to discard it, this player would be able to use this ability and then have it returned to them at the beginning of each round. Now, finally, on these cards, there are also the green abilities as well, and these are going to be instant, but for example, this one is going to be increasing this track here. Now, this track is important because it's going to help for evasion, whether or not the cartels are recognized and whether it's easy or not for them to try to evade the police. But another thing that it's going to do is break ties. So whenever there's a tie, if the cartel token is on the red side, the cartel will win ties. However, if it's on the gold side, the police will win ties instead, which is an incentive for the police to try to bump up that track with the cards that they have. Now, taking a look here at the cartel's hand, we would again be able to use those yellow abilities, and then after that we would play 3 cards for the abilities on this side instead. So if we were 2 cards short, you would have the 5 cards available where you would be deciding what to do, and there are cards that stay in play for the cartel side, which is going to help you add to your different combats. And there's also going to be things such as being able to reveal other players' chips. So I'll leave this one in play here as well so that you can see what that will look like when we are resolving things. Now, once all players have played 3 cards, that's when you're going to place out your chips that you have. So you're going to be placing them face down, and in player order, you're going to place 1 chip at a time. So you can kind of try to pace out and see what you think other players might be doing, such as using those decoys to kind of not only set someone astray, but also try to wait to see what other players are going to do before you decide what you want to do. So with that, I'm going to place out these chips so you can see what that would look like. Now, taking a look here at the chip pools, again, these would be placed face down, but as I am showing you the example, I'm going to be placing them face up for you to be able to see. So we do know that that 1 grade C level drug is going to be created over here. So this will be over here. So we're going to place out these different rounds. Now, the DEA is going to place first because they are further back on the manhunt track. So the DEA, as they do have 2 decoys, may choose to place a decoy just to see what this player is going to do. So the cartel player does start off with a drug mule here at the public airport. So the DEA may choose to put a decoy token here just to see what is going to happen. So I am just going to leave these face up so that you can see what I am planning out. But then for the cartel member, they may choose to do the same thing because the decoys can be very powerful. So they may choose to take the decoy and place it somewhere. For example, they do have this airplane, and they might want to use that because the airplanes do have pretty high statistics. So they might take this decoy and also place it here, hoping that the DEA player thinks that it's one of their gunmen. So next up, the DEA player is going to be able to place out police, but they are aware that this player does have the airport. So I think that they would be aware of that and place this out here, hoping to potentially bust them in this area. Now, for this player here, they now have a choice because they do see that the DEA is coming over here, potentially, and they do have 2 trucks. So they may choose at this point to completely pivot their strategy and use one of their route tokens to go in this area here. So they'll place this over here. And it is the DEA's turn, and now knowing that this player may potentially be trying to go for this route here, the DEA actually has this token here, which is going to be a move. So this is going to be really risky, where at this point, they're going to have to choose whether they want to try to go for this route or this route. So unfortunately, drugs may be smuggled this round, but they're going to try to move to this area here if that's where this player is going. So now for the cartel player, they can see that the police are placing out a few different tokens, and they now have choices for where to send their final route. They could send it through here, or they could use their airplane and send it here. Now, even though the police do have tokens everywhere, I think this player would choose to send this over here because their airplane does have a pretty high evasion. It has the 5, so I think they would send it over here. Now, finally, the DEA is going to be able to assess everything that they are looking at, and knowing that they do have a decoy here, but knowing that the value is pretty high over here, I think that the DEA player would choose to place this over here to at least have some options. Now, for the cartel, they're going to have this choice where they know they're no longer going to be going for this route, and they do have 2 gunmen that they're able to place out. So they're going to probably place 1 down here in Miami to be able to contest with the agent that is already down here, because they still need to be able to deliver the drugs. Now, finally, the police have this final decoy, which the other player doesn't know that this is a decoy, so they may place it down here just for a little bit of intimidation. And finally, for the last player, seeing this happen, they may choose to place this here, but knowing that they have a decoy here, they may come to protect their drug mule, but I think that their airplane will be able to get by the police over here. So I think they would place this down here because they know at the most the police are only going to have one support in this area. So all of the chips are going to be placed out in that fashion, and then you're going to reveal them. So once they are revealed, any of the decoys are going to be returned to the players. So those decoys aren't really going to do anything, but then the other pieces are going to gain the respective units. So these units are going to populate on the board for the DEA, and then for the cartel player, they're going to be able to place out their airplane. So with this one, it is an incomplete route, so they are going to simply take this route back to be able to have over here. And then over here, they're going to place their 2 gunmen. So we will place these out. And then finally, the police player would be able to move one of their units to this area. But since this area isn't important at all, this would just be removed over here and sent back to their supply. Now, after that, each of the areas on the map are going to resolve in the number order. So you see where number 2 is this lab here. So that's going to happen now, where these drugs are going to be smuggled, and we're going to choose to send them over to our private airplane. So that's going to happen, and then we would go on to 3, and then 4 is going to be this route here if we had chosen to use trucks. 5 would be this route here, and then 6 is going to be the public airport. Now here at the public airport, because we are not currently smuggling drugs, there can't be a drug bust that would happen. So then we would move on to area 7, where there are drugs. So this is when a drug bust is going to be attempted to happen by the DEA. But taking a look here, the airplane has a value of 5, whereas this agent currently only has a value of 1. Now, players are going to be able to use things to contribute to this, such as those cards that you played earlier. So where this is going to help with you trying to find someone, this is going to be able to add 3 to your value for trying to search for the drugs. So this player over here may choose to use that. And they also have this ongoing ability that they can choose to use as well. So again, these are just 2 cards that I have here in front of me. Check out the gameplay for a full view of how the cards are played each round. But this would be a way that a player would be able to add 5 to their check for that, meaning that they have a total of 6. Now, looking over here, this player does not have anything that would have helped with that, but this ability here would have been to allow the player to look at 2 face-down tokens and then remove 1 police officer token. So that would have been really good for this cartel player to play, but in this example, we did not do that. So it's currently a 5 to a 6 value, and now players are going to contribute a card from their hands from what they have left available. So that's why holding on to 2 cards that might potentially be higher value can be very important, because in this example, if the cartel player were to play a 3, but the DEA player were to play a 2, that would equal an 8 for the cartel player, and then that would also equal an 8 for the DEA player. So that is where this track here is going to come into play, that is going to break ties. So where the cartel player is currently breaking ties, they would still be able to get past this current drug bust. So that means that the drugs would be able to continue to be transported down to Miami here in the airport and attempt to be sold. So that is what is going to happen for that part there. But if the drugs had been busted, they would have been removed from the board, and that's one of the ways that the police players are going to gain victory points at the end of the round. Now, when players do contribute cards from their hands for these types of checks, you do redraw a card into your hand. So this is a way for you to cycle through cards and perhaps gain cards that are a higher value as well. So, for example, we have a 3 and a 4 drawn for future things that might happen, such as a potential drug bust over here or a combat. So you saw what a drug bust is going to look like, and that's always going to happen first, where the cartel is going to attempt to evade before a combat is going to be initiated. So that would have happened in this area here, but then after that, a combat would happen if there are opposing sides. Now, if they had been busted, this would have been how the cartel player would have lost their airplane as well, where they would lose this vehicle for transporting in the future because it was detained by the DEA. Now, to take a look in this area here, this is when first that evasion would have to happen, but then a combat would be triggered. So I'm going to jump straight ahead to what combat is going to look like. And when combat is going to happen, you're going to compare numbers in a similar way. So this is going to be a 2, and in this instance where the cartel player has 2 units, one is going to be the leader. So it's going to be a value of 2, whereas the other one is going to contribute a value of 1, meaning that the cartel player has a current value of 3 and the DEA player has a value of 2. Now, again, you are going to have cards that are going to augment this. For example, the cartel player would be able to use airplane bomb to add 2 to their current weapon damage that they're able to deal. So we would be able to use that, making ourselves a 5 instead. But in a similar fashion, players are also going to discard a card from their hands to contribute that value. So again, when you are doing so, you are adding the value that is up in this top left corner here, the purple area. But you are going to discard a card to contribute to that value, determine who is the one that is coming out on top, and then you will deal damage. So where the DEA player only has 1 unit, even if they did enough to take out these other 2 units, they would only remove 1 from the board because there's only 1 unit here. But otherwise, that is how combat is going to be resolved. Now, finally, if this DEA agent was taken out and the cartel player was able to sell their drugs in Miami, you're going to take a look at this chart here. So first, you're going to take a look at the quality of the drug. This one is going to be a C quality. Then you're going to take a look at how many police agents are currently in this area. So there are 0 to 1, so we're going to put this over here. And then it is 1 to 2 drugs because there's only 1 here. So we'll place this over here, meaning that it's going to be 7 million plus 3 million equaling 10 times 1 for 10 million. And the amount that players sell for the drugs that they're able to bring to the final area is going to determine how many victory points they get at the end of the game. So for 10 million, that wouldn't be anything, but if this player was able to gain at least 11 million from a particular sale, they would gain 1 victory point. Or for 21 to 40 million, 2 victory points, 41 to 60 million, 3 victory points, and it scales up from there. So that's a way that the cartel players are going to be gaining victory points throughout the game. And for this particular cartel, you're also going to gain victory points for where you're at in this track here. So this is a political track where, depending on where you're at, for example, if we were here, we would be gaining 2 victory points at the end of the round, plus an additional 1 for our faction bonus, meaning that we would get 3 victory points for being here at the end of the round for any future rounds after that. Now, this can fluctuate where you are going up on the track, but you can also go down on the track as well, so that number can change round to round, not only going up, but going down as well. Now, finally, at the end of the round, the manhunt is going to take place, and this also represents the police trying to find the different cartels. So all players are going to be able to discard 2 cards from their hand, again using that purple value up in the top left corner. You're going to add that up and then move yourself forward that many spots on the manhunt track. So for the DEA player over here, where they have a total of 6, they would move this tracker forward 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to over here, whereas the cartel player only played 5. So they're going to move 5 forward, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, meaning that this is where they're going to end up at the end of the round. Now, for the DEA to gain points at the end of the round, they're going to place this over here, and as you can see, they're falling under the 1 bracket with how close they are to the cartel. So they would gain 1 victory point for that, and an additional victory point because of their particular faction bonus for being the DEA, meaning that they would gain 2 victory points at the end of the round for that. Now, one thing to note is that when the cartel player does advance on this political track, whenever you reach one of these tokens down here, you're going to gain that benefit. So in this instance where it's a 2-player game, the one cartel player will have all of the tokens available to them if they're able to reach up to this threshold. But in a 4-player game, when there are more cartels playing, you will have to be able to get to that spot first before the other cartels to be able to gain this ability. So for example, there's a truck here, there's a banana, an airplane, things like that you're going to be able to gain when you reach those different areas if you're the first player to do so. Narcos is going to be a game where everyone is trying to do different things, where there are the police players and there are the cartel players, and you're trying to accomplish different tasks. So the game is highly asymmetric, where you're trying to accomplish different things depending on your goals, but where it's all very real life things. It's very intuitive with the things that you're trying to do. You're either trying to make better drugs and then smuggle them all the way to the airport, or you're trying to bust the people that are doing these things and trying to find them along the routes to try to grab these drugs before they're able to get them all the way to the airport. So this game is played over the course of 5 rounds, where at the beginning you do feel a lot smaller, where you're trying to do some things, you don't have many chips, but as you start building out everything that you have available to you, and as the cartel, as you start gaining money, or as the police, as you start having these ongoing abilities that you're able to tap into every round, you're going to start feeling stronger and stronger, where you feel you're able to pivot toward other players' plans. But where you're placing out these orders in a hidden way, it can be really tricky, where you might think you know what you're doing, and you might think you're either being sneaky and getting these drugs all the way to the border, or that you are clever to what other players are doing and perhaps able to catch them. But overall, it's going to take a huge battle of wits to be able to place out these different chips where you need them, to be able to perhaps move your units, or just have these destinations and routes where you're trying to smuggle along these drugs. Now, players in the cartel are also trying to balance their labs, where they're trying to create more drugs if they're able to, but also higher quality drugs, because those are also going to make more money for them as well, and that's all going to translate into things that they're able to gain, such as political power, and that will be points for them at the end of the game. So if you'd like to see exactly how this game plays, as I said, there will be a gameplay on the channel between Alex and I highly suggest checking out the game found link down below to see everything that they have planned. This has been a preview of Narcos. I've been Professor Meg. Thank you all for watching the Board Game Code channel, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!